العالمين. لك الحمد يا ربنا كله ولك الشكر كله علانيته وسره إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك. نحمدك يا ربنا حمد النبيين وحمد الصديقين. نحمدك يا ربنا حمد المخبتين المعترفين. نحمدك يا ربنا حمد المحبين. نحمدك ولا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك. جل وجهك وعز جاهك، تفعل ما تشاء بقدرتك. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبد الله ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وحبيبه. بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح الأمة وكشف الغمة وجاهد في الله حق الجهاد حتى أتاه اليقين. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على المصطفى محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه ومن اهتدى بهديه وعمل بسنته إلى يوم الدين. وارض عنا معهم بفضلك وكرمك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم آمين. I praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of heavens and earth, the provider, the sustainer, the cherisher, the giver of gifts. I thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, endless He is in His glory, for the blessings that He has bestowed upon me and my family and loved ones. And I thank Allah for bringing me to the fold of Islam. And I thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for health and wealth. And I thank Him for family. And I thank Him for friends. And I thank Allah for the blessings that I know and the blessings that I do not know. And I express my gratitude to the Lord in words and in action. I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah. And I bear witness that Muhammad is Allah's final prophet and messenger, the bearer of glad tidings, alayhi salatu wassalam. May the peace and the blessings of Allah be upon him and his family, his companions and followers, and those men and women that walk steadily in his footsteps until the day of judgment. And I ask Allah to make each and every one of us among them. Allahumma ameen. My dear brothers and sisters, I greet you the greeting of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The month of Muharram always brings up these ideas and these thoughts and feelings pertaining to our history. We remember in the month of Muharram the Hijri year, and we remember the deliverance of the Israelites and the saving of Musa alayhi salam. We remember the migration of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam and the believers from Mecca to Medina. But it has been so many years since I witnessed the month of Muharram where the day of Ashura itself falls on a Friday. It has been over 10 years since I personally witnessed that. And as Muslims, as believers, as people whose hearts are attached to the Prophet ﷺ and his path and his family, it would be a huge ignorance on our part and a huge obliviousness on our part if the day of Ashura falls on Friday and we do not talk about Imam Hussein and the events of Ashura in the year 61 after the Prophet ﷺ migrated. Because it's on a day like this, so many years ago, Imam Hussein and his very small group of followers, including less than 20 or 25 of Ahlul Bayt, the family of the Prophet ﷺ, they took this trek, that hijrah, so to speak, from the city of Mecca all the way to Kufa in order to stand up against the tyranny of the Umayyads. And I bring this up today not just because of the historical significance of that event and the consequences of that event. I also bring it up today because I see that the Ummah is divided in a way that cannot be described as less than silly. On the one extreme, you have some who, out of love and reverence and veneration to Imam Hussein, have considered the day on which he died to be more important than the day on which his own father died, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, or the day on which his grandfather died, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And on that day, certain practices take place as a reflection of mourning and sadness that paint a negative picture about Islam and Muslims around the world. The Prophet ﷺ specifically warned against self-flagellation and self-flogging and crying and screaming and tearing off clothes when a loved one passes away. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ even prohibits mourning more than 3 days. In the hadith that Atiyah narrated, that we have been prohibited to mourn longer than 3 days, except when it's a spouse. It becomes 4 months and 10 days. But you're not even supposed to mourn the death of someone longer than 3 days, let alone spending 1,400 years tearing off clothes and hurting yourself and bleeding yourself for all the cameras of international media to record. Now the other extreme is the Muslim Ummah that completely ignores the day on which Imam Hussein was assassinated. They ignore the legacy of Imam Hussein. They refrain from calling their kids Hassan and Hussein because somehow it became a sectarian matter. And not only that, on this day we've heard fatwas that, and I've read those fatwas myself, that on this day we're not supposed to do absolutely anything whatsoever because of the fitna. And I've heard fatwas from scholars that don't even fast on the 10th of Muharram because that somehow could be used and fuel and further sectarianism, right? I see Muslims who offer only a lip service apology to the murder of Imam Hussein, who refuse to call oppressors with the only word that they should be called, and that is oppressors. So we refrain from calling them oppressors just because it's the history and they were all companions and we cannot really say that one was good or one was bad. We should just refrain from interference. And the day on which the Prophet's grandson ﷺ was heinously murdered, became ignored. So one group emphasizes it so much and the other group completely forgets about it. And the truth is always somewhere in the middle, as we have been taught. And I wanted to, again, as a Muslim, remind myself today of the loss of a great leader who came from the family of the Prophet ﷺ. I wanted to look into the spiritual underpinnings of the event. I wanted to look into the consequences of that event and how it impacts our lives up until today, and what is it that we can learn as individuals and as Muslims. How can we benefit from something like this? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted the family of the Prophet something that He never granted anyone else in the Quran. He said that He Himself desires for the family of the Prophet ﷺ to be purified. إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explicitly says in the Quran that He desires for the family of the Prophet ﷺ to be purified and to be cleansed 100%, which also tells us a lot about Imam Hussein and his legacy, and it warns us against ignoring that legacy. There's an ayah in the Quran, in Surah Ashura, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks on the Prophet's behalf. And Allah says, قُل, to the Prophet ﷺ, قُل لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا. Ya Muhammad, say to your people, I am not asking you for a reward or a compensation. قُل لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا, except for just one thing, and that is al-mawaddata fil qurba, that you are kind to my kin, that you are kind to my family, right? And it is in the shade of that ayah that I offer my love to the family of the Prophet ﷺ. This has nothing to do with sectarianism, Muslim, Sunni or Shia, it doesn't matter. If you're Muslim and you profess Islam, loving the family of the Prophet ﷺ is an article of faith for us. As our scholars used to say, and I'm not just saying Shia scholars, all Sunni scholars would agree that حُبُّ أَهْلِ الْبَيْتِ عَمَلْ يُتَقَرَّبُ بِهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. Loving the family of the Prophet is an act of worship that brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in the hadith that were recorded by Sunni scholars, hating Ahlul Bayt and resenting Ahlul Bayt is an act of nifaq, it's an act of hypocrisy. It means that your Islam is not complete. There's something corrupt in your heart. It is in light of that it needed to be emphasized. It has nothing to do with the sectarian divisions of the Ummah. Mind you, leaders historically on both sides have used the incident to further their own political agendas, right? So the Umayyads followed them thereafter. They used that event to portray themselves as the legitimate leaders and to portray Imam Hussein and Ahlul Bayt as the usurpers. They are the ones that came to take power away and to sow the seeds of instability in the Ummah. And then you also have extreme elements on the other side that used the event of assassinating Imam al-Hussein to further drive wedges between the two major groups of our Ummah. Okay? I have seen and witnessed with my own eyes Shia scholars that do not consider Sunnis to be Muslims in the first place. And I have seen with my own eyes, I have seen Sunnis who, in response to statements I made in the microphone, considering that Ja'faris to be a madhab, and that is the position of Azhar, by the way, and the shuyukh of Al-Azhar have always considered historically the Ja'fari madhab and the Zaydi madhab to be legitimate perspectives on Islam, however they might disagree with it. I have seen people in the Sunni community come to me and say, you should not call them madhab, you should call them dinu Shia. Right? You are exposed to the extremes on both sides, and I always tell both groups, we come into Islam with La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. And we leave Islam if we renounce La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Anything else is something we can work with. You might have disagreements, but don't give yourself the right to push someone out of the fold of Islam. That is the job of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But let me not delve into the politics. Let me focus on the spirituality, because that is what I want to do today. Today, brothers and sisters, is the day of shukr and sabr. It's a day of gratitude and perseverance. Why? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you in the Quran in 4 locations, إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِكُلِّ صَبَّارٍ شَكُورٍ. He talks about signs in the universe to be observed. Now we see signs all the time. We witness signs all the time. When people witness signs, do they all believe in those signs? The people of Ad and Thamud, they saw miracles with their own eyes. Did they follow their prophets when they saw those miracles? They still refused. Right? The people of Mecca witnessed firsthand the miracle of the Quran that beat them in the one thing they mastered the most, and that is language and the art and the eloquence of language. Did they all believe? They didn't. Most of them didn't. Only later, when Islam had the upper hand, that most of them started coming into the fold of the deen. The existence of signs and miracles in and of themselves is not necessarily an indication that people will follow them. So Allah says in the Quran that only people who have those 2 qualities will be able to see the signs as such. Those who have shukr and those who have sabr. Those who are in times of ease say alhamdulillah and show gratitude, and those who are in times of difficulty show perseverance. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِكُلِّ صَبَّارٍ شَكُورٍ. The signs will only be witnessed and processed and understood by those who persevere and those who show gratitude. Right? So why do I say that today, the 10th of Muharram, the day of Ashura, is a day of both gratitude and perseverance? Because it is today, thousands and thousands of years ago, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved Musa alayhi salam from the tyranny of Pharaoh, and for that we are grateful. But we are also trying to work on that agony in our hearts and show perseverance, because it is also the day on which Imam al-Hussein was so heinously murdered. And this applies to so many other examples, by the way. The 17th of Ramadan. What happened on the 17th of Ramadan at the Prophet's time? In the year 2 after Hijrah, it was the Battle of Badr. So on the 17th of Ramadan, we rejoice as believers that the Muslims were saved and they prevailed on the day of Badr. But the 17th of Ramadan is also the day on which Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib was assassinated. So it's a day of gratitude and perseverance at the same time. The 12th of Rabi'ul Awwal, what happened on that day? It's the day on which the Prophet ﷺ was born. and we rejoice at that event. But it is also the day on which the Prophet ﷺ passed away. And our hearts are overwhelmed with sadness when we realize that. Okay? 10th of Muharram, the 17th of Ramadan, the 12th of Rabi'ul Awal are Ayyam Allah. These are days of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on which great things happen and horrible things happen. And the true believer who has those two qualities, shukr and sabr, will be able to see the signs for what they really are. And that is exactly what should keep our hearts busy with on a day like this. Okay? Rather than worrying so much about doing things out of the scope of sunnah. And I know that we only see this in certain parts of the Middle East and certain parts of South Asia. I've had conversations, by the way, just for your own understanding, I've had conversations with Shia scholars, and I've read and I've studied Ja'fari fiqh, by the way. Alongside all the Sunni schools that I've studied, I studied Ja'fari fiqh. Self-flagellation and flogging and hurting yourself is considered to be haram by Shia scholars themselves. But most people don't listen. Because it becomes such a cultural thing. It becomes a mob psychology. When you see everyone in your neighborhood and your apartment building, and everyone goes on the streets of Beirut or the streets of Basra and the streets of Islamabad, going and doing this to themselves, you just join in, right? But it is a practice that does not bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The sin of not supporting Imam Hussein was not committed by people who live in this age. It was committed by people that lived back then, thousands of years ago. تِلْكَ أُمَّةٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ, as the Quran says. That is a nation that has already expired. لَكُمْ مَا كَسَبْتُمْ وَلَهُمْ مَا كَسَبُوا. You have your own deeds and they have their own deeds. وَلَا تُسْأَلُونَ عَمَّا كَانُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. And you will not be held accountable for the things they have done. Are we reviving the notion of the original sin again? Should we all hurt ourselves and bleed ourselves because Adam alayhi salam refused to listen to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ate from the tree? That does not make any logical sense to me. So this is not a day on which we express our mourning by hurting ourselves and bleeding ourselves. It's a day on which we express our mourning by studying the legacy of Imam Hussein. By understanding what is it that he lived and died for. What was the value of his martyrdom? What are the principles that led his life? And what can I do today in order to live within the boundaries of those principles and revive the legacy of the Imam and his teachings the way we do with the Prophet ﷺ and Ali ibn Abi Talib? That would be a more effective way of approaching the matter. On the other hand, I also don't think that this is a day on which we should completely ignore the events of Ashura. And we should completely ignore the history. I have been asked by brothers in the Sunni community, Imam, you should not mention Imam Hussein in Muharram whatsoever. Why? Because you just further the cause of Tashayyuh when you do that. We're supposed to ignore our history because the minute you mention the name of the grandson of the most beautiful human being that lived on this earth, it becomes a sectarian matter. I refuse to accept that. It is not a day on which we make fun of people on the other side. It is not a day on which we read the news, shake our heads and say, that's disgusting. It is not a day on which we increase the enmity within our community. It's a day of forgiveness. It's a day of love. It's a day of reaching out. It's a day of opening our hearts and trying to understand where other people are coming from. It's a day of looking inwards. What can I do to learn more about Ahlul Bayt? What can I do more in order to understand? See, brothers and sisters, that is a very dangerous state of affairs. Right? Most of us that we call ourselves Sunni Muslims, right? Who come from the tradition of Islam. And I was brought up into a Sunni family, and I was brought up within the boundaries of Sunni scholarship, right? And for the most part, I consider myself to be Sunni. But the problem is, the minute we start ignoring the family of the Prophet ﷺ, and their legacy, and their knowledge, and the ilm, I am just hurting myself, really, essentially, at the end of the day. And then matters of faith are now co-opted by matters of politics, and matters of history. You should always make sure that your deen is clean, that your deen is pure of political and historical considerations. Okay? I teach the community, and I give law talks and lectures, right? And many of those talks and lectures are recorded, and they go on social media and so on and so forth, and thousands of people are exposed to them. But let me ask you a question. As a father, if you compare the knowledge you teach your own children and the knowledge you teach the general public, which one is more intimate? Which one is really like a reflection of everything that you are? Because we want our children to be better than us. What I teach my kids, for me, is a lot more intimate, is a lot more a reflection of what's in my heart than what I teach the community in public. I'm not saying that I give the community, second grade teachings and give my kids first grade teachings. I'm not saying that, right? But it's something that naturally just comes from the heart, because you teach your kids. The Prophet ﷺ must have taught his own family things that the wider community did not see. And all of the Sunni scholars historically accepted that there is a school of thought that is called Madrasat Ahlul Bayt. Aside from any considerations of Tashayyu', that was not the issue. The point is Ahlul Bayt, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir and Ja'far al-Sadiq and their descendants, there was that streak of knowledge in the family of the Prophet ﷺ that continued to reign in his family. The challenge is, neither the Shia community was able to truly get the essence of that knowledge because of sectarianism and because of going around the world and doing things on behalf of the Imams when they weren't even there. And most of the Imams distanced themselves and disavowed such actions, right? Nor did the Sunni community get itself exposed to that streak of knowledge. And Ahlul Bayt and their legacy and their knowledge, it was just simply lost. So on a day like this, I remind myself as a Muslim that there's something to be taught there. Something that will benefit me and benefit my family and my loved ones and make me a better human being. Regardless of whether you consider yourself Sunni or Shia, that has no bearing on your love for the family of the Prophet ﷺ and your desire to find what is it that they authentically taught. And one of my greatest teachers, Sheikh Muhammad Abu Zahra, who was a law professor, taught Islamic law at Cairo University in the earlier years of the 20th century, and he published all these books about the Imams, right? The Sunni Imams and the Shia Imams, all of them. And he has this beautiful methodology. If there's a report that comes from any of the Shia schools, and that report does not go against the Quran, it does not go against the established ahadith, I accept it. Because why do I assume that Sunni hadith scholars had their rigorous method of learning and collection, and I automatically say, well, Shia scholars did not follow the same rigorous method? That would be doesn't make any sense. Because hadith scholarship on both Sunni and Shia sides, they kind of grew around the same time. And they must have followed, rigorous methods to authenticate the reports that were coming. So why would Sunni scholars be more rigorous in their method and Shia scholars would not be rigorous in their methods? Again, that does not make logical or scientific sense to me. Yes, there's a lot of emotion in how reports were collected on the Shia side. There's a lot of emotion as a result of the events that happened, as a result of how the state targeted the Imams, as a result of how the state continued to target all the members of the Prophet's family because they considered them to be a threat. There's a lot of emotion involved in the way those reports were documented. And I have to say that, scientifically, as a student of knowledge, I assume that there's a lot of reports in Shia collections that are not authentic. Okay? But I don't dismiss entire collections as a result of that. I treat every report as a report that is worthy of my attention in and of itself. And after applying the scientific method, if it turns out that this doesn't make sense, then it doesn't make sense. But you do not dismiss thousands of years of scholarship just because they come from the madhab that you do not follow. That is not the way that you and I as Muslims of today should behave. Right? Continue to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala according to the madhab that you follow, but always acknowledge that diversity in Islam, in the way that we reach out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has perhaps happened by design. Allah wanted to maintain that diversity among us so that we worship Him in slightly different ways, but the essence is still the same. We all pray 5 times a day. We all fast in Ramadan. We all turn our faces to Mecca when we pray. We all perform Hajj. We all give in charity. There might be slight differences here and there between this madhab and that madhab, but at the end of the day, we all say, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. We all acknowledge the sanctity of the Quran. We all agree on one copy of the Quran. We all turn our faces to the same Kaaba. We all love the family of the Prophet ﷺ. And we all consider what happened to his family to be a heinous crime across history. For me, brothers and sisters, that is sufficient. And that is what I remember today, on the day on which Imam Hussein was assassinated. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to elevate the Imam and the Prophet's family to the highest level in Jannah. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us all their companions in Allah's Jannah. Allahumma ameen. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the legacy of the Imam to continue to thrive and endure in our lives. Brothers and sisters, raise your hands and speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the heart. ادعوا الله وأنتم موقنون بالإجابة. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعين به ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. وأصلي وأسلم على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وقائد الغر الميامين محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم يا ربنا تسليما كثيرا. My dear brothers and sisters, I shared with you just a quick reminder today. A community that is just as diverse as us, a community that is made of people that come from every corner of the world, a community that is made of people with different colors in terms of their convictions, in terms of their madhabs, and in terms of their ideological backgrounds. I say today that the day on which the Imam Hussein radiallahu anhu was killed is a day that is worthy of our attention, regardless of who you are, whether you're Sunni or Shia. This is a day on which the man, as the scholars say, had the greatest resemblance to the Prophet ﷺ, fil khalqi wal khuluq, in terms of his facial features and in terms of his akhlaq, in terms of his morals. By the testimony of most of the companions, they would say that Al-Hussein, especially when he grew up and he reached adulthood, he became the closest to the Prophet ﷺ in both the way he looked and the way he acted, radiallahu anhu arda. And him being, killed the way he was is something that is worthy for us to remember today, regardless of where we come from. The 10th of Muharram, as I said earlier, just like other dates, is a day on which we exercise both perseverance and we show gratitude. We exercise perseverance and we show gratitude. It's a day on which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala delivered Musa alayhi salam, and for that we are grateful. But it is a day on which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with His wisdom, that we may or may not understand sometimes, the Umayyads took the life of the Imam in the way that they did. And I wanted, inshallah ta'ala, to just give you a snapshot of the Imam's history very quickly for those of us who never studied the life and legacy of Imam Hussein. He was born into the family of Ali and Fatima radiallahu anhuma. And the Prophet ﷺ did not have any boys of his own, any sons of his own. So he loved the Imam Hussein so much, and he took him as his own son, to the extent that he says in the hadith alayhi salatu wasalam, "Man ahabbani falyuhibbu Husayna." If you love me, you're expected to love my grandson Hussein as well. Right? It became an article of faith for us, the believers, to love the Prophet ﷺ and the family of the Prophet ﷺ. And as I said earlier, showing resentment to the Prophet's family is showing resentment to Islam. Right? And then Imam Hussein grew up in the household of the Prophet ﷺ, and he was exposed to that intimate knowledge. When he became a teenager, he was asked by his father at the very dark times when Uthman ibn Affan was assassinated. His father asked him and his brother Al-Hassan to stand guard at Uthman's house, at the door, to protect the Khalifa. Even though Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib had huge disagreements with Uthman ibn Affan. And so did, so many of the other companions as well. But still, the life of the Khalifa must be protected. Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein, they stood guard at the door of Uthman ibn Affan until the Khalifa himself asked him to leave. He said, I will not, jeopardize your lives and put you in danger in order to save my own life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do to me what He wants to do to me. And only a day later he was assassinated. When Imam Hussein grew and became an adult, he fought with his dad, Ali ibn Abi Talib, against the Khawarij. And he fought with that against the Umayyads. And when his father was killed by Abdurrahman ibn Muljim, who was from the Khawarij, he gave bay'ah to his own brother, Imam al-Hasan. And he supported his brother's claim to the caliphate. And for 6 months, there were skirmishes back and forth between the camp of Imam al-Hasan and the Umayyads. And when Imam al-Hasan finally decided to surrender and to save the blood of the Muslims and to uphold Muawiyah as the Khalifa, while his brother al-Hussein disagreed, but he still followed his brother. And he still said, bringing the ummah together matters a lot more at this point. And that was an incredible year in the history of our ummah. It was an incredible year because everyone gave bay'ah to Muawiyah in that year. Those who loved him and those who hated him. Because everyone decided that unity is going to be a lot more important to us than other considerations. And that went on basically for the next couple of decades until Muawiyah himself passed away. And before Muawiyah passed away, he did something that was really wrong. He appointed his own son Yazid as the Khalifa. And he wanted to collect the bay'ah, the pledges of allegiance from the Muslims and the leaders of the Muslim ummah before he even dies. So he does not want to give the ummah the right to choose its next leader on its own. Now those who supported Muawiyah say, well, he was just doing this in order to protect the ummah from bloodshed and disunity. And those who opposed him say, well, he was just doing the bidding of the Umayyads. That's really what it is. That was just a tribal thing, and he wanted power to stay in his own tribe, as it was the habit of many Arab tribes. Regardless of how you look at Muawiyah as a figure of history, Yazid now became the strong man of the caliphate. He became the Khalifa. So what does he do? One of the first delegations he sent was to the city of Medina. And he asked his governor in Medina to collect the bay'ah from key leaders, and number one on that list was Imam Hussein. It matters to him for the stability. I need to hear it from his own mouth. You support me as your leader. Of course, Imam Hussein refused, as I would have, as most of you would have, because Yazid ibn Muawiyah was not really a morally upright person. So he moved to the city of Mecca. And when the people of Kufa heard that Imam Hussein refused to give his bay'ah to Yazid, they all rose and said, you know what? You should be the Khalifa. We will all support you if you come to Iraq. Right? So he decided to send his nephew, Muslim, Ibn Aqil ibn Abi Talib, all the way to Kufa in order to verify whether those people are for real or not. Whether what they're saying is really true. And Muslim ibn Aqil goes there, and he spends a month and 2 months and 3 months, and he does not come back. And then the news came. The Umayyad strongman in Kufa, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, took the life of Muslim ibn Aqil. And that angered the Imam very, very much. But he still felt that I shouldn't just go out of retaliation. So he waited. But there was so much pressure from the rest of Ahlul Bayt. How can we let this go? We have a cause here. We have a cause. You are Imam al-Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Umayyads are going around with tyrannical methods, with their dictatorship, hurting the left. We should not let this happen. Yes, we're only 150 people, but we should just do the right thing as the family of the Prophet ﷺ. So he marched with them. Many of the companions warned him. They were more realistic. He said, the Umayyads will crush you guys, because they are extremely cruel people. They're unforgiving. They will not just let it go. But the Imam, driven by his own principles, again, see, that's one of the things that I always think about. You have to be careful when you read history. If the desire of Imam Hussein was to overthrow Yazid and just become the caliph, he would have needed a lot more than 150 people, wouldn't he? Right? He would have tried to mobilize armies from Mecca and Medina and Yemen and other places and go there in 5,000 or 10,000 people in order to give it a real shot. But it's not the overthrow of Yazid that drove the Imam. It's his desire to establish justice, to make a statement, to show the Muslims that haqq can still be defended, even if it means my own life. And I promise you, he made that statement and it was heard loud and clear, and we're still talking about it today, 1,400 years later, right? And Imam Hussein goes there, and they are met by an army of 4,000, sent from Kufa, led by Umar ibn Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. And then initially they negotiated a little bit, and negotiations failed because the army is just asking him to go back, be silent. This is how it is. It's not going to change. And stop your opposition. Just go back to Medina. That's it. We're not making any changes in government. We're not opening it up. We're not organizing elections. Nothing. You just go back and be silent. Of course, the Imam refused to do that. And Ahlul Bayt refused to do that. And over the next few hours, the massacre ensued. The Imam himself was killed at the hands of this man. His name is Sinan al-Nakhai. Sinan ibn Abi Sinan al-Nakhai. SubhanAllah. Just this guy that you probably never heard his name before. It's just that one act that completely changed history. That one evil act completely divided an ummah of millions. Just that one tiny little bad decision that he made on that day. Most of the army, by the way, of Umar ibn Sa'd, they would not even touch Imam Hussein. They felt that Imam Hussein should not be killed. That's not what we're here for today. We're here to stop them from marching towards Kufa. But one foolish, evil person makes that decision, and the rest of the ummah suffers. SubhanAllah. But the Imam made a statement, brothers and sisters, and let me end the khutbah with this. Without what Imam Hussein did, tyranny would have been institutionalized in our history. A usurper comes, takes power, becomes the leader. The rest of us have to support them. You are the leader. We love you. God bless you. Just reign for as long as you live. And you want to hand over power to the next guy? That's fine. That is your realm. You are our leaders. We are your subjects. That's it. That type of tyranny, of absolute monarchy, would have been the norm in our Islamic history. But alhamdulillah, Imam Hussein technically institutionalized the idea of political opposition. That was 1,000 years before Europe. That when you see a tyrant, you don't just remain silent. You stand up and you do something about it. Perhaps you don't need to sacrifice your life, every time you do it. But there are so many methods that you need to take in order to make sure that tyrants don't sleep comfortably at night. There are methods to take if you don't want to put your life in jeopardy, but the Imam did, because he knew his responsibility. As the grandson of the Prophet ﷺ, his own life doesn't really mean that much to him, but it means so much to the ummah. And if he gave his life for a great cause, the ummah will continue to remember that and to be inspired by that. So on a day like this, if we take the legacy of Imam Hussein and turn it into sectarianism, and turn it into they did this, and they said that, then we're completely missing the point. If you take the legacy of Imam Hussein and turn it into a method by which both groups of the ummah hurt each other and attack each other, then we're completely missing the point. But if you take the legacy of Imam Hussein, try to understand it as American Muslims today. What are the issues and what are the struggles in my neighborhood, in my county, in my city, in my state? What are the matters of justice that I need as a Muslim to stand up for? What is it that other groups are being exposed to? I say, like the Black Lives Matter movement, for example. You partake in the Black Lives Matters movement because you're inspired by Imam Hussein, right? Support other groups in their plights against tyranny because you're inspired by the teachings of Imam Hussein. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, brothers and sisters, that the soberness of this day will wake us up and will help us realize the greatness of the teachings of the Imam and the family of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this day to strengthen our hearts so that every single one of us becomes an agent of good an agent of reconciliation in our community. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to utilize all of us to become bridges of understanding and to do our own share of intra-faith, working with the two major sides of the aisle in our own ummah. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save the blood of our Muslim brothers and sisters all around the world. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to establish us with firmness as a community of righteousness and justice, and to make us among those who help others and those who help themselves. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the legacy of the Prophet ﷺ and his family and his companions will continue to be alive and well in our hearts. And I ask Allah to make us balanced Muslims who show love and reverence to the Prophet's path and his sunnah, and who show love and reverence to the Prophet's family. Allahumma ameen. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this day to give aid and support to our brothers and sisters all around the world that struggle for their freedom against tyranny, and to make us agents of their help and support. Allahumma ameen. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وإسرافنا في أمرنا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. اللهم ربنا أكرمنا ولا تهنا وعافنا واعف عنا وارفعنا ولا تضعنا. اللهم وآثرنا ولا تؤثر علينا. تقبل منا يا ربنا واقبلنا. اللهم يا رب إنا نسألك من كل خير سألك منه محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، ونعوذ بك من كل شر استعاذ بك منه محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات، المسلمين والمسلمات، الأحياء منهم والأموات، إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات يا رب العالمين. وأقم الصلاة إن الصلاة كانت على المؤمنين كتابا موقوتا.